Hello, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us as we starting a little bit late today due to some technical issues. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I'm the Customer Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. And I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Understanding the New Acumatica License Model, presented by Mary Abdian. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can ask any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll answer all questions at the end of the presentation. We're also recording this presentation, and it will be sent out tomorrow afternoon, along with the links we mentioned throughout the session. You're also able to download a copy of the presentation deck in the handout section of your GoToWebinar panel. And finally, we'd appreciate your participation in our closing polls and survey. With that said, let's go ahead and dive in. That's enough for me, and I'm going to hand it over to Mary Abdian for the main event.
Great, thanks, Courtney. Well, as most of you know, I'm Mary Abdian. I've met a lot of you, and I'm here today as a strategic technology advisor. My role primarily is to help guide you through understanding a lot of the things that Acumatica is doing, help navigate our team at SWK and otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and remove myself from the camera. I'll come back on at the end there. And in the meantime, we'll just launch into our particular presentation today. I think it's important to note that our goal is to help enable your success. And we do that through helping you with innovation and enablement as it relates to your software applications. So let's take a minute and meet some of my colleagues. The strategic advisor team for Acumatica is primarily made up of Joe Santoro and myself, but the real folks that help us navigate all the important things is our customer success managers and our customer account managers. So I want to make sure if you haven't met your customer success manager, it's either Brian Rutledge or Chris Austin, and I sometimes assist in that role as well. But their general policy, or general goal is to communicate policy changes from Acumatica, things like we're going to review today, and navigate just generally throughout the SWK ecosystem. Many of you are already familiar with your customer account managers. You know, both the customer success and the customer account managers are all complementary services. So these folks are here to help you. They can help you with any transaction, small or large, and primarily could be the primary point of contact. In the Northeast region, we have Angela Harris. And in the Southeast, we have a team led by Ashley Bonzer and Brian Hedgepath. And in the Western region, we have Sherry Palumbo as our lead person there, accompanied by Betsy Quiss. And then our partner success program is led by Tiffany Kurtla. So at the end, we'll reintroduce these folks to you again and make sure you know how to reach them. So a lot of the information that we share through to you through our customer account managers and customer success is through our collaboration portal. So some of the things we're going to cover today will be there. So that's a great other source of information for you. And if you're not familiar with this, just reach out to your customer account manager and we'll get you set up. Before I start on the agenda today, I wanted to call out something that's important because a lot of the primary license model changes today are focused around the SaaS, or the software as a service deployment option of Acumatica. So today there's actually two deployment options, and given this, it's important to understand a little bit about the differences. So the the SaaS license model is hosted by Acumatica in the Amazon Web Services environment, and a vast majority of our Acumatica customers are SaaS, ours and Acumatica in general, probably roughly 85%. However, there's often times where people would like to privately host their Acumatica and they're on a private cloud subscription, and it's hosted then privately on their own server somewhere. PCS is impacted, but not quite the same way as SaaS is. And this will become evident as we go through the presentation. So let's review the agenda and get started on some of the details. And there are a lot of details. So our goal here is to talk about how Acumatica Cloud Computing works, discover how the license model can be maximized for good performance in the Acumatica Cloud. We're going to talk about some of the benefits of the new license model and how you as an individual company might benefit from that. We're going to understand and explore, and I'm probably going to underscore explore because there's a lot to digest here. But we're going to explore why an organization might consider a move to the new license model. And today is about scaling Acumatica to meet your needs. That's what this new license model is about. It's really about, yes, there's feature functionality added today, but it's mostly about how do we make it perform well for you. When we're all done, we can talk about how you can reach your customer account manager and have a tailored licensing assistance from our team. And I finally want to underscore on the agenda today, there's no requirement today from Acumatica for anyone to change. So I think that that's an important thing to remember. All right, little background. Acumatica Cloud Computing has kind of three primary components. It's the software application itself, and it's hosted in the Amazon Web Services environment. Of course, we have all the unlimited users, unless you're on the small business edition, which has named users. And this is allowing you to have a lot of folks in your organization, everyone in your organization access the system, and there's no per user cost. And then what happens is we actually consume resources on the server. So we're going to pay for what we use in the Acumatica Amazon Web Services environment. So we're going to talk about how you can know what you're using and consuming in Acumatica and the application, and therefore how we're putting a demand on those AWS resources. And this is, again, nothing new. This is what's happening today in the SaaS environment. And so when I say that, I just wanted to make sure that when we talk about the licenses that all of our existing customers have today, nothing has changed in the new license model. These are still parts of those. All right. So what is actually in the Acumatica SaaS Cloud? We're drilling in just a little bit more here. So we do have the financial applications, distribution, construction. That's all the user interface software. Within that software application, we need to store data, we need to store attachments, and there's a feature in Acumatica called snapshots. So that takes up space. So the third thing that we have in the Acumatica SaaS Cloud is all the infrastructure that supports the storage, the space, and the application. That's everything that Acumatica is provisioning in the AWS environment. Servers, processors, memory, SQL Server, and it's all sized to support your transactions. Of course, there's all the infrastructure of firewalls and backups and internet connectivity. So this is what makes up your SaaS subscription. Of course, if you're PCS, you have to provision all of those things in the AWS portion there yourself. You can put it anywhere you'd like to on your own server or otherwise, but that's a burden for your organization. So Acumatica needs to provision the right environment for your needs, and improving this is a key component of the new license model. So when did this new license model become available? Again, the majority of our folks on the call today attending are what we're going to refer to as legacy licensing. So they purchased on or before April of 2024. And legacy is just an indicator. It doesn't mean it's going away or anything like that. It's just an indicator for us. And then the new license model is anyone who's purchased on or after April of 2024. Today's review is about how these license models are differently provisioned and scale. So the best thing to do is to take a look at the legacy license and understand what made that up. So performance in the SaaS environment is impacted by two key components, CTVs and ETVs. And many of you have had this conversation with our teams before, but commercial transaction volume is identified as those transactions you're putting into the system. They might be customer-facing documents like a sales order or an invoice. They might be vendor-facing documents like a payment or a purchase order. Those are all things that put demand on the server. And if you have high volume commercial transactions, it's going to be a greater demand on the server. ERP transactions are any time within the application that a save takes place. And the reason that's important is because, again, it's putting demand on the system. So these two components in our legacy license have always been paired together. You can see how the columns align up here. M1, which is small, medium, large. Medium 1 is 3,000 commercial transactions in a month. and 60,000 ERP transactions in a month. And those two are coupled together. When either one of these is exceeded, that can impact performance and it can be a license violation. So a use or consumption of commercial transactions and ERP transactions can increase, and therefore there's more demand on the server in the AWS environment. One reason SaaS publishers are able to provide lower cost infrastructure is that they deploy applications in a shared environment. Now, each customer is secure and segregated from the other, but it's a shared physical server environment. And there can be competition. I might have a super busy day, you might have a lighter day. So let's review where in the application you can see how you're consuming Acumatica resources. This is a sample of a place within the Acumatica application called the License Monitoring Console. And many of you have seen this before, and you're going to notice a couple of new things. First of all, the word legacy is in green here, but in your screen it'll just say the word legacy. And it determines, this screen is displaying what your license details are. So similar to my example highlighted in the last screen, this is an M1, so 3,000 monthly commercial transactions and 60,000 ERP transactions. Recommendations are just that. You're going to get good performance if you're having daily transactions in those particular realms. Doesn't mean there's no constraint or anything. On the right-hand side are literal constraints in the software. And this has not changed with the new license model at all. The new products that we're going to talk about have different quantities in the system's constraints, but it's still part of the application. So across the top, you'll see statistics, warnings, and constraints. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can see what we're actually consuming. This license monitoring console will display in the upper grid each month. And when a line is highlighted, like in this case, October is highlighted, it's going to show us every day of the month in October. In this example, commercial transactions are under the limit, which is great. And then ERP transactions we can see in June through September, we've exceeded the ERP transactions, and you see the red X. This is a license violation. So we have exceeded the usage that we're allowed with this license. And that means that we do need to increase our tier, or we need to understand where these transactions are coming from so that we can maybe adjust configurations in the system. So every blue hyperlink you see on the screen is something we can drill into. So I selected September and the 127,809 ERP transactions. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. What I like about this screen is it tells us everything and where it's coming from. So you can see we have sales orders, invoices, shipments, etc. And you can see that there's the action type tells us how is this action and screen being created. UI stands for user interface. The top line is highlighted as the highest volume transaction. I sorted these from highest to lowest. And we can see that the send and receive email automation schedule is set so that we have a whole lot of ERP transactions taking place. So this is a great opportunity for us to adjust this license configuration and maybe get back in compliance. If indeed the configuration is exactly what the business needs, then we need to visit changing the license tier. So now that we know how you can see how you're consuming in the system, let's take a look at what's changed. I want to remind us that we have these three components in the SaaS environment: the application, the storage, and then the infrastructure. So the new license model, we're going to spend a little bit of time on the screen. The new license model is made up of the cloud computing components we just looked at, but these are actually new products. And the reason it's important to understand that these are new products is that the infrastructure configuration is different, which means it's a different product, which means it's going to perform differently. Feature functionality is based upon the version of the software and the module that you're licensed for. So we're not talking about, do I have a pick, pack, and ship feature, or do I have expense claims? We're talking about the infrastructure. So the model is made up of a few things. And in the center of the model here, you'll see additions. So the first thing, if you're a new prospect for Acumatica, is you're going to find the addition that has the features that most likely match your business. And it could be that you're both construction and distribution, and we can combine those together. Then there's ancillary modules, CRM, expense claims, things like that. But you're going to pick the software feature functionality. And then you're going to go out of the inner circle, and we're going to go out to the blue arrows. So the blue arrows represent the new products. And Essentials is essentially small business, and it's geared for small companies with small transaction volume, and it's a named user license. The other three, Select, Prime, and Enterprise, the blue arrows, they are increasingly larger instances which allow for higher commercial transactions, higher ERP transactions, and support a larger number of users in the system. You still have an unlimited user license, so that's true for all Select, Prime, and Enterprise. The outsize arrows we use 3 or 4 components to kind of determine what is where we fit. How many users or how many people are accessing the system, the commercial transactions, the feature functions if we need to add something, and number of employees, again, is used to kind of scale a prospective customer for Acumatica because we don't know how you're consuming. But in your case, as an existing customer, we can actually see, as we went through the exercise a minute ago, what you're actually consuming. So we've talked about the inner circle, we've talked about the blue products, and now I want to point out the dark blue reserved resources. This is the real difference. This is where we're going to get to say, in a shared environment, everybody is sharing the resources, but I have a really busy requirement on ERP transactions or high volume of importing or something like that. So I need more resources for my instance. I can get that by selecting Choice Enhanced, Premium, or Ultimate Reserved Resources. So let's take one more step further and talk about this streamlined licensing model. Performance is still impacted by those two components, commercial transactions and ERP transactions. License compliance, however, is now only based on commercial transactions. So you see just the one bar there. Still the same, the single highest volume, customer or vendor facing document, but it's decoupled the commercial transactions and the ERP transactions because now if you have high ERP transactions, we can just add more resources to the instance and we can reserve them exclusively for your license. So summarizing what's changed, we're decoupling commercial transactions and ERP transactions, making CTV the only compliance. The benefits is this is much more flexible. You don't have to move up a tier and have a lot of availability for commercial transactions if it's only ERP transactions or vice versa. We're going to align the commercial transaction consumption to your business and scale the resources to meet the ERP transactions, which is really the demand on the server. So the new license model allows for the addition of these reserved resources because performance is largely based upon volume and transactions in the system. And a high volume of transactions can create bottlenecks and slow the system down. Reserved resources can relieve that bottleneck and allow you to do more work in a particular given time. One thing I like to think about when I think about commercial transactions and ERP transactions, in legacy, commercial transactions and ERP transactions are stop signs. In the new license model, commercial transactions are still a stop sign, but ERP transactions are a caution sign. You may see a degradation in performance, but we can just add more resources. So I wanted to point out here that how are we going to figure out what's right for you? Well, there's some recommended, and this word is highlighted in yellow because it's recommended maximums. We're going to look and say, how many inventory SKUs do you have? How many integrations do you have? How many ERP transactions are you performing? And then we're going to fit you into one of those blue arrows. Is it essential, select, prime? And from there, we can determine if you need to have additional resources via reserved resources. And remember, these are recommendations to help customers guide them into finding what's the optimal performance for them. I did a little monthly translation here, 2,000 ERP transactions on a daily basis translates to 60,000 ERP transactions, and then 5,000 daily commercial transactions translates to 150,000 ETBs. And the reason we talk about this is the next screen is going to show us how we're going to do this combination and what can go together. So what products scale? The essentials, is just that small business edition. If you're beyond that, you need to move to a new product. And that product might be Select, Prime, or Enterprise. So there are no reserved resources. It's X'd out for essentials. But if you're in the Select product, you have an option to add choice reserved resources. If you're in the Prime, you can add choice or enhanced, and obviously enhanced is greater resources than choice. Enterprise actually comes with enhanced, so it already comes with reserved resources, and then you can add on top of that. So this shows us what reserved resources can be added to what products. So what does reserved resources mean technically to your application? Well, we had transactions on the screen, and if we need, or our volume and our transactions need a boost because the system needs a boost to support those transactions, then we're going to add reserved resources. It's going to give us CPUs, memory, bandwidth. It's going to give us a higher level of resource independence from other traffic because those resources are exclusively reserved for your license. And this example is showing us that we get in choice 2 times the resources to support transactions, 3 times in enhanced, 4 times in premium, and 6 times in ultimate. And that's just helping our transactions get boosted. Other things that happen in Acumatica are things called parallelism and concurrency. And parallelism was hard for me to get my arms around until an analogy was shared with me, and that was that the parallelism is like a queue, and a good example of a queue is the TSA line at the airport. So we all get to the airport early so we can get in the big long queue, and then we get to the end of the queue, and if there's only one TSA agent there, we don't go very fast. Well, in the case of choice, we get 4 TSA agents. In the case of enhanced, we get 8 TSA agents. So we're able to push more through. And remember, keep in mind, we're talking about milliseconds in the queue. This is not a long period of time. So the enhanced resources, or excuse me, the reserved resources, whichever flavor you pick, is going to increase parallelism or increase the number of TSA agents to help us get through and not be delayed. You can also have a maximum parallelism by adding a processing node, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then the concurrency, which is impacted by APIs. The concurrency, think about that as the initial queue for getting into the TSA line. And when that queue spills over, people at the end of the line can get delayed. Now they're going to get through eventually, but they're just going to be delayed. So we can improve the concurrency with reserved resources as well. Okay. Keep in mind, this is all milliseconds, but it makes a big difference because things are always concurrently happening in the system. So additional fuel for those reserved resources, we have processing nodes, which is basically a separate application assigned to manage background operations, not the user interface types of transactions, maybe heavy reporting, maybe heavy APIs. So that's certainly another way you can boost performance. And then there's always a dedicated SaaS instance. This gets pretty pricey, but it's certainly an option. So I know we've covered a lot of information and we're closing in on not a lot of time left here. So we're going to turn it to Q&A in just a moment, but we want to make sure that some of the next steps are review your license, so know where you're at, understand your consumption. You can request a complimentary license review from your customer account manager. Customer success and myself might join that call and help you out. You can plan now for growth and expansion and modify your configuration, maybe reduce those send and receive email transactions. But there's a lot of new features in Acumatica in addition to all this improved performance. So you can join the rest of our series to learn a little bit more about that, or just reach out for a strategic discussion. Again, your primary point of contact is going to be our customer account managers, and there will be resources that Courtney's going to talk about here that are available in the chat. So Courtney, turn it back to you.
Wow, thank you, Mary. That was some really great information. And we are coming up on time, so thank you for those of you that, bared with us on a little bit of a late start. If you have to jump, no worries. The Q&A portion will be continued, will be included in the recording that you receive tomorrow. So if you get your question in, you can check it out when we send out the recording if you need to leave on time. But, for those of you that are still here, we have time to do Q&A. So we've got a lot of great questions that have come in, Mary, throughout the presentation. So I'm excited to dive into those. And before we do, we just want to ask you guys a quick poll we would appreciate your participation in. So would you like to evaluate the new license model? So that is, we'll have, your account manager reach out. Maybe it's something that includes Mary and her stat team or customer success, and really get you some in-depth information about how the new model would affect you and your business. Okay, and like Mary said, in just a moment, I'll be dropping some of those links in the chat as well for you to check out. We're going to leave this open for just another minute, and then Mary, I've got some great questions for you.
All right, bring them on.
Okay, and I'm going to close out this poll. Okay, so the first question I have for you is it a requirement to change to the new license model?
Absolutely not. Today, Acumatica, you have an agreement with them and you have a subscription in the SaaS environment, no need to change. I'm sure over time they will retire certain environments, but at this point, there's absolutely no requirement to change.
Okay, and can I change to the new license model at any time?
Technically, yes. Your subscription period remains the same. So if there's any pricing differences, like you're adding resources or something like that, you can do that at any time. And if there's any pricing differences, they'd be prorated to align with your expiration date.
Great to know. And what does it cost to move to the new license model?
Boy, if that were an easy question, I'd answer it. Every configuration is unique. I mean, if you think back even look at that license screen within the license monitoring console, it's all going to depend upon how you're consuming the system and what modules you're licensed for. But that's why we invite you to have that kind of tailored conversation with your customer account manager and customer success.
Okay, we've got a bunch of questions, so thank you everyone who is getting their questions into the Q&A section. Mary, the next question I have for you is, are on-premise deployments being phased out?
So I'm going to use the Acumatica term private cloud subscription. There is no understanding that I have in any way that private cloud is going away. So the application is exactly the same. The software feature functionality is exactly the same version to version, and I have no reason to believe that privately hosted is going away. Now, Acumatica might tell me something tomorrow different, but that's what I know today.
That is good to know. Another question we had come in was that Amazon was mentioned as a PCS option. Is Azure hosting still supported?
I believe the supported platform specifications for privately hosted are available on the portal and on our resource center. So I do know that we actually, in our privately hosted environments at SWK, we do host in Azure. So it is supported, yes. Does Acumatica deploy their SaaS in Azure? 90% of the time it's in AWS. There may be instances that it is in Azure, but I don't know how we would actually specify that.
Okay. That's good. And also, guys, I want to preface, we'll do our best to answer all the questions we can online right now today, but, some more complicated questions might require an offline conversation as we continue to go through all the great questions we have. So another question, Mary, is what is the difference between expanded capabilities of Select and full capabilities of Prime?
Yeah, we can put together a listing for you, but in the Select, which is the small business version of Acumatica, there are certain feature functionality modules or components of modules that are not available. They're only available in, say, Select Prime or Enterprise. So it's a matrix of solutions, and we can certainly review that with you on a one-on-one basis.
Great to know. And is there any impact at all on PCS customers?
The impact is looking at decoupling commercial transactions and ERP transactions, because in the legacy license model, you are tied to those. So I'm PCS, I'm privately hosted on my own server, and my ERP transactions are very high. I have to buy the next tier up, even though my commercial transactions are low. If you move to the new license model, it may be better for you because you can provision the resources you need for those ERP transactions on your own server and stay within the license tier of the commercial transactions that you're utilizing. So it's another assessment, but I think the decoupling of the CTVs and ETVs together is the biggest benefit for PCS.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple more here. So another question we had come through is, will this help with cost issues related to API usage and data calls with our ancillary systems such as data warehousing?
So we would need to look at the license you have today and look at that constraint side of the license monitoring console and see exactly what your license supports. And then we could compare it to the new license model, because there's a lot more detail than what I shared on my very quick presentation here. And all of that is in the license agreement, which is one of the links that Courtney is going to share out with the team here. Um, so I think we just need to look at it. And again, these are definitely unique situations where we need to look at all the ways in which you're consuming and using the system to make a good recommendation.
Great answer, Mary. And I think this looks like our last question. So, final question of our Q&A session is, how long before renewal should we wait to have the discussion with the account manager, or how long before renewal should we start this discussion with our account manager?
Well, you can start it anytime you want. So before renewal, in the middle of your term, or after renewal, you can evaluate your license. So in the simplest form, regardless of whether you're thinking about the new license model versus the legacy license model, you can't downgrade your license except for at time of renewal. You can always change or increase your license. So that's kind of the differentiator. Can't go down until it's time for the subscription because it's an annual subscription. But we can always change if we're increasing, or if we have a tier increase, is always a really good time to consider the new license model and make a good assessment about what are we really looking for your license. And
Okay.
I'll just add
And
one more clarifying thing there, Courtney. I'm sorry.
yeah,
We like to have all the details of what you're going to add or subtract to a license completed 30 days before the renewal date. That's our preference, and that's Acumatica's preference. So reach out anytime you have a question about your license to your customer account manager, and they will be, notifying you of your renewals and the time frame well in advance, anywhere from 120 days in advance of your renewal.
Okay. And Mary, I know we're coming up on time, but we passed time, but we still got a few people with us, and we got a couple more questions.
Sure.
Are you okay to keep going with
Yeah.
those?
Oh, yeah. Great. I'm here. I'm still here.
Perfect. Perfect. We've got a couple more. So I know. Hello. We'll say hello again. So another great question we've had come through is, if a company moves to the new license model, is there a trial version
Mm.
or an opportunity to move back if that doesn't work well?
Well, given how new this is, I would say that no one has asked that question before, and I haven't asked Acumatica. They certainly haven't volunteered it. But I think that one of the offerings, that we want to do is have that kind of tailored license review with you. And if you have that level of question and how do I know it's the right thing for me, I would invite us to involve Acumatica's technical sales team, because they have tools we don't have. They can look at things in the AWS environment with tools that we don't have, and they can help make a good, strong recommendation. I doubt that there's a trial, and I doubt that there's a go back, but good question, and I'll ask that, so when you reach out to your customer account managers, they'll be prepared.
Thank you. And this one, I think, is our official last question. So, how do we evaluate, the new model versus the old model if we're in implementation phase? They're not
That's a good
transacting yet,
question.
is a little bit of extra information there.
Yeah, and the reason that's a good question is we don't yet know how you're actually consuming, right? So a lesser license, a lesser resourced license in implementation is typically not a performance challenge at all. The nice part about, if you do decide you need more resources, it's a pretty fast turnaround time. Obviously, there's a signature and a payment and a deployment, but that can happen in a matter of days. So if you are in implementation and you have questions, then just let your PM know, your project manager know, and they'll reach out to myself and your customer account manager and customer success, and we'll just start having that conversation sooner rather than later.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And since we've gone pretty far past time, I see some questions still coming in. We will get those answered. We'll have someone reach out to you to answer them offline and discuss your specific scenarios. If you've asked this question and you still have more questions or want to talk more in depth about the different license models and which one is right for you, definitely let us know in the post-webinar survey that you want to discuss this a little bit further, or reach out to us at info@swk.com, info@swktech.com. Your customer account manager, anyone else at SWK, they'd be happy to connect you with Mary and the team and get you those answers to your questions. And like Mary said, I added those links to the chat. We'll also have those links available in tomorrow's follow-up email that will have a recording of this session as well. So we are here to help in any way we can. And thank you for joining today and spending a little extra time with us. And thank you so much, Mary, for a great presentation.
Great, and I'm sure you'll think about SWK the next time you're in the TSA line.
Great analogy. Thank
Thanks,
you all and
everybody.
have a wonderful rest of your day.